It's hard. I want to give up. Like, I cannot do this. A big philosophy I would live by is fail. And it stands for first attempt in learning. Fail. Like I failed. I failed so many times. I'm at a very beautiful time where I'm going to do things differently. My main aim starting Pop-Up Party and Play was I didn't want anyone to feel hindered because they have a child in their career. I want them to be able to exceed much or as little or however they want, regardless if they've got children.
Welcome to the Bay HQ, where we inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure you give us a 5-star review. Today we have with us Leah Chowdhry, who's the founder of Pop-Up Party and Play, the first British Asian woman to swim the channel, and the author of Making a Splash. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm impressed. You got all of it in order and everything. I'm great.
Yeah. In the editing, some of that will be like, some that's supposed to be cut out will be fine, yeah.
Sorry, I'll let you start going. Yes, I'm doing well today. Thank you.
So we've obviously had your brother on before.
You have?
So we can test your corroboration here about your childhood. So when you were growing up, did you believe you'd ever get to where you are today?
That's a great question. I think I was brought up in a household where anything was possible, regardless of gender, skin colour. So anything I believed in, I was always supported and encouraged to achieve. So yeah, I think I was blessed.
And you started by studying psychology, right?
Yes.
What made you go down that path?
So my mum's actually a teacher, and I was always at school. I had a lot of challenging times. I wasn't the most studious person. I wasn't the person who went into a room and would read books or just naturally a good student. So I struggled quite a lot. And my mum's piece of advice to me was always do something that you're passionate about. Do something that you love. And whatever happens in life, it's career or if it's studying, it will make sense. You'll make money or it will be successful. Your definition of success can be very different. If that's making money or making an impact, it will come if you're doing what you're passionate about. So I just read through every single university course, and I found this course at Bristol University. It's child psychology, and it's all about child development, understanding our upbringing and the importance of nature and nurture. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I was like, I'll work out the rest later. So I applied, got in, and that's where I started my journey.
And if I'm correct in saying, right, you said earlier that you were dyslexic as well.
Yeah.
And did that have a big part to play in that?
Growing up, I didn't quite understand why I was different. I didn't understand why I was set in an English class to read 2 chapters and everybody the next day would happily come in. I would read the first couple of lines and it just didn't make sense. And I was I would think about something else. And then my mum was phenomenal in the sense that she took loads of courses to understand dyslexia and special needs and all this kind of stuff. And in the end, I ended up getting the Audible book. So I got into Audible books before it became really popular and cool. Now it is
Trendsetter.
Now. No, because I was otherwise I'm not going to get through the chapters. And I always ended up falling asleep anyway to them. But that wasn't the point. But I think I knew I was different. I just used it to my strengths as much as I could. I just found ways around. And I think that was actually probably the foundations of how I just became very different to my peers. Because it wasn't easy at school, I had to find a way around. So when things got tough for me, it wasn't let's give up. It was, right, how are we going to find a way over this obstacle? And that was just a practice that I took throughout my life. And I just adapt it in every single way. And I think that's why it's so important for us in our community that we are going to get thrown really, really tough, hard, tough times. It's inevitable. And it's about what do we do in that moment which has defined you, not where you've come from and how you do that. So I think that's the lesson I was kind of learned the most from school.
And then initially after school and after university, you went into working and having a job, right? Mm-hmm. And it took you a few years, then you decided to start up Pop-Up Party and Play.
Exactly.
What were those years like in the middle? What made you go down that path and eventually leave?
I think the biggest learning I've ever had in my life, which I've struggled with in our community, is it's not a race. You don't have to get there yesterday. And I think if you look at our community, I will go to even now, Asian weddings, and the aunties and things will come up to me and be like, have you done this? Are you married? Have you had kids? Have you da-da-da, da-da-da? I remember actually going to one Asian wedding like not long ago, this lady came up to me and goes, like, oh my God, you're the girl that swam the English Channel. You're the author. You run your own company. Like, like you've achieved so much. Why are you not married? And I jokingly turned around and said, because I yet to find the first British Asian man to swim the English Channel. And I don't think she found it very funny. But I think in our community, we're
a challenge for somebody out there.
yeah, maybe.
It's like, if you want to marry you, you've got to go and swim the channel. Yeah.
There definitely is, but they're probably not single, but it doesn't mean that's the point. But I think we're in our culture and in our community, we're constantly in a space of scarcity and wanting to achieve the next thing, have your children, run your business. And I think that period between me leaving university, I knew I loved working with children. I knew one day I was going to run a successful children's business. But it's about divine timing. It's about putting it out there to the universe and being like, I know I'm going to do it, and be okay with the journey. Like, I learned so much whilst I was at EY. I was at EY for almost 4 years, became a chartered tax advisor, and I use those skills today in my business. And that was beautifully divine timing. And I had to be okay with the journey, because if you're not okay with that journey, you'll get to becoming the CEO and it won't be enough for you. And then you'll look for the next thing. And you'll be constantly looking for happiness, success in a space where it's at the next stop, and you'll be miserable. So I think that period for me was exactly the journey I was supposed to go on. And yeah, I think I learned skills that I've developed and used in my business on a day-to-day basis. There's lessons dealing with people, but there's also times where I was like just having fun and being a grad and celebrating life and making mistakes. So yeah, I think it was a great time in my life, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
So having a background in tax is such a huge advantage when you start your own business.
Yeah.
It is such a pain.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky that my dad was an accountant. So when I started up the business, he was very helpful. Now, obviously, with what happened last year, I'm having to work it all out and like negotiate with accountants myself. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And it's been a very steep learning curve, where I was kind of protected before because of my dad. Mm-hmm. So if people are listening right now and they're starting their own business, is there any, it's not financial advice, but is there anything you think a lot of people miss about tax and things like that they should really be aware of before they get started?
Let's go strip back to basics. Just go and take a really basic business, like corporate tax, salary sack, all those kind of like your NIC, just really basic. Take a little basic course, have a basic understanding. I'm a big believer that you don't need to be a specialist in every single area, but as a CEO of a company, you need to have an understanding of everything that's going on in your business. If it's the marketing side, if it's the finance side, you need to have an understanding. Go into a basic course, understand. Like, I think a big element that we miss at school is like, how does our tax bands work? Like, what is a personal allowance? Like, how do people when do we pay NIC? When do we not pay NIC? What is the concept of salary sacrifice? Like, a big element of my business is that we work with employees where we have our childcare running through salary sack. So they take it pre-tax. So employees are saving money, employers are saving money. But that concept for someone who has never been down the tax route is like, what? Like, what's going on? And you'll realize that maybe even that basic tax course or understanding of financing, like, will make you look at your own business in a very different way. So that would be my advice.
Yeah. And then like those years you had there as well, obviously you said you learned a lot from like communications, all different kinds of skills there. What made it the right moment, you said? Like, when did you know it was that moment that this is when I want to launch Pop-Up Party and Play?
I knew when I wanted to leave. It was like, I think I'm very blessed that I don't always listen to my intuition, but I have a good intuition. Like, I know it'll be like this, like all of a sudden, like, same when I made a decision to swim this channel, it was I've made the decision and this is going to happen. And I bless my parents because they know when that's happening and when that's coming. Like, when I've made that decision, they're like, okay, let's just get out of the way. Like, it's going to happen. So I knew I wanted to leave. I knew I wanted to do something in the child space. I just didn't know what at that time. And I initially wanted to set up children's nurseries. I did the numbers, and for me, it just didn't make sense. I think when I left, it was a time where working from home had just started being introduced. And I just wanted to do something that I just did a bit of research, and I said, well, why is childcare not as flexible? People are now working from home. A lot more of women are in work. So the childcare is shared between two individuals, male and female, two men, two women, whoever it is, it's two people taking responsibility now. But childcare is still very traditional. It's 8 till 6. It's on one location. You have to go drop off. Okay, there's wraparounds on schools, but I don't understand why it's so structured. So I wanted to do something different. I wanted to make, my main aim starting Pop-Up Party and Play was I didn't want anyone to feel hindered because they have a child in their career. I want them to be able to exceed to the much or as little or however they want, regardless if they've got children. And I found that my parents and my friends were like, well, I had to take a career break or I had to go do this. And I wanted to stop that from happening, which is why I set up Pop-Up Party and Play.
And then what were the actual, like bringing the business together, right? Mm-hmm. Did that start like as soon as you left your job? Did you start on the side?
No, I stopped my job. I think, okay, this is a very controversial point, but I think that the moment you have plan B, plan A becomes less direct. I think cutting off options makes you work harder at plan A because you have no other choice. So I left my job, which I'm in a very fortunate situation. Like some people can't do that and that's fine. Like I appreciate that, but I had to make it succeed because I had no other source of income. So I quit. I researched for a couple of months and then I was living like hand to mouth for a good good 6 months till I won my first contract. So I had to make it happen. I remember them times being like, I want to give up. Like I cannot do this. Like no one's gonna, I was dealing with white middle-class men who just didn't have to worry about childcare. And they were the ones that were making the decisions. And they were the ones that were like, well, no one needs a service. But I would go to their colleagues and they would be like, this is such a great idea. Why has no one else thought about this? So it's just about getting run in front of the right people. And eventually I did. And I won one contract with a very big name. And the doors all started opening.
It's interesting because I listened to something recently about how when the Spanish went to South America, right, what the general did there, he burnt all the boats. So there's no way they could go back home again. And in some ways I give the opposite advice, right? And for the balance of, but the point is, even if you quit your job, you can always go and get another job again, right? If you wanted to, if it wasn't working out, there is always that like, emergency plan B. And I think there's always people got to remember because sometimes it makes people more scared to leave in some ways and think, if it doesn't work out that I'm homeless, but you can always usually get a job. If you've got the skills and you've done well, obviously not everybody does. And you've got to know yourself pretty well. Like, have you got the skills? Have you got the ability to make it happen? And if you do, then it's likely you're going to be very employable as well in the future anyway. You mentioned there about like the decision makers. How does it work with your business? Like who are the main customers or is it you getting individuals or is it more you're pitching to the companies and how do you go through that?
I think a big thing to learn when you're setting up a business is change. Be open to change. Your business isn't going to be what it was when it first started. I went in doing B2C. So I targeted weddings. I targeted like kind of anything that needed childcare on a customer side. And it worked and it did very well. But I also realized after a period of time that I needed contracts. I needed annual contracts. So I switched to B2B. I still have B2Cs. I still do like the VIP clients, but I tend to not do it as much because for me, it just didn't make financial sense. So when I switched to B2B, my clients range from members clubs, so like head of events at members clubs, I'll kind of have conversations with, like the likes of WeWork, the Office Group, and the community managers that put on events for their members. But then also we had conversations with Cannes Film Festival to have like a pop-up childcare on site at these kind of festivals to make it more accessible to parents, to women, to men. So it really, really depends on the industry, but it tends to be more kind of the event side of things. But also small businesses, like I speak to CEOs and they'll be like, I need to attract great talent. And this is like a way to get people in and be like, we care about our employees and we want to hire parents and we want people to stay and feel like they can have children and it's okay and they can still make career progressions in our company. We want to support them. I think a big element of when I do it in the corporate space, businesses and companies, is when parents don't want to take annual leave over half term. So we will come in and pop up in their office over school holidays. So they'll drop off their children with us, they'll work in the office, and they'll pick them up at lunch, then pick them up at the end of the day, but which will result in them not having to take annual leave over school holidays. They'll take annual leave then later on in the year, and then they can maybe take them on holiday because they can afford it, or whatever they decide to do. But instead of having all the parents taking annual leave at the same time, we can provide that service now.
I think it's a common thing for many people when they think about business, always think about B2C and going straight to the customer, because that's what we tend to see as consumers, right? Because that's who's targeting us, that's where the marketing is coming. But obviously when you go to the business side, that's where you can impact so many more people. So you have a conversation with one person who's in charge of let's say a membership space. You're then impacting hundreds of people that work in that membership space with one conversation.
100%.
And that's the thing which I think more people need to sometimes think about when they're starting their business, like you said, about how you can impact people much quicker if you go through some of these large organizations.
Yep.
And some people have that, like, they don't want to do it because they want to be like scrappy and get each individual person. But it's actually a lot of hard work. And like you said, that stability can come with having these bigger contracts.
100%.
And if you did want to go B2C later on, you've still got that foundation, which makes it a lot easier. You don't need to worry about where's the next check coming from, because okay, we've got this money here, but we can now also use that foundation to reach out to more people.
Absolutely.
Was that pivot hard for you though, when you were actually going through it? It's always difficult, I think, for people when they've had this first idea that they really love, and they're like, actually, this one's better, but then sometimes they can sometimes you can be very quick about it, and sometimes people let it go a little too long.
It was really tough. It was my baby. And I was like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to help parents. So it was a challenging time, and I debated it for a while. And I think my advice to people who are going through that change is, before you do anything, set your values of the company. I think if you have values within your company and you're like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Mine was like, I want to make an impact to parents. I know I want to do that. So the moment I needed to make that decision, I looked back at the values of the company and I said, actually, making that switch to B2B is actually going to help me achieve kind of my mission as Pop-Up Party and Play. And that made the decision easier. So I think rather than focusing on your product and like if it's tech software or if it's a service business or whatever it is, if you've got your values of like your mission of why you've decided to set up that company, decision making becomes a lot quicker, because you're just like, well, I know I don't need to debate whether this is good for the company. It's, I know my values, I know my mission, and therefore decision making becomes quicker. And what in turn is that when you hire people and they understand your mission and your values, they start making the decisions that are aligned to you too, because we're on the same journey. So that for me was a big learning experience, because it was important and I had done it, but I didn't realize how important it was till I started making very crucial and big decisions.
And obviously Pop-Up Party and Play was growing amazingly well, but then you hit the pandemic and it was a big disruption to so many businesses. And if your business is helping people when they're trying to work and their kids are going to nursery like that, but then nobody's doing that anymore, it must have been a big shock to you. And how did you deal with that? And it must have been a very difficult time as well.
Oh, it was super, super challenging. I tried a lot of different things initially, and I came from a place of pure scarcity, really. I was like, let's go online, let's do this. And I felt like after a while, I ended up diluting my brand a bit, because I was like, I just need to do so many things and I need something to come in. And then I switched to I actually stepped into my spirituality a lot more. I was never overly religious, but I then had to be like, okay, let me just do something a little bit different. And I think that's when I went back into that kind of spirituality side and realizing actually maybe God or whatever you believe in, if you believe in anything, has a plan for me. And I need to learn something else, because to take my business to the next level, God thinks I need a different skill. And the moment I kind of switched to that, the opportunity started coming in. So then I got approached by companies to come in as their operations person, their COO. And then I had that kind of 2 years during the pandemic where I was helping tech startup companies go through their fundraising, their seed round, their Series A. So I got them to the next level. And once I'd done that, I was like, now I'm ready and got so many more skills under my belt to take back to Pop-Up Party and Play, to take it to the next level, which is where I am now.
And how did you find that adjustment going back to working with another organization? And it's obviously because at Pop-Up Party and Play, you call all of the shots, right? And then to work with a team where obviously there's different people who've got different, like you've got the hierarchy and the people who've got different stakeholders. How did you find that environment, and how did being an entrepreneur also help you go back into that environment too?
Set your intention. Set your intention before you get into any of those situations. Have those conversations with people. Like, I had multiple conversations with quite a few startups before I decided to pick the ones I did. And I was just very clear with, I need to be aligned with you. I need to understand what you're doing sits well with me, and vice versa. And I think it's the COO and the operations person in a company is very, very key in the sense of their values and missions, because I found with the tech startups I was in, the CEO was very much the face and like doing the fundraising side, which meant the day-to-day running of the company fell on me, which meant that they had to trust me in the filter, like my kind of views and my understanding of the company and my values would filter down to the rest of the team. So we had to be clear about that. And I think the moment I stepped into those companies, that the CEOs and everything trusted me. So I didn't feel like they were hovering over me or being like, you can't make this decision. They were like, I've hired you and put you in this position for a reason. Do your thing, which I was very blessed about. So I never had that struggle of, oh, why did you make that decision? Why did you hire that person? My last company, we were at 8 people. We went to 45 within the space that I was there, and I was kind of overseeing that, and we hired the right people. So it's that trust element. So set your intention and make sure that you're aligned and trusting, and it will kind of, I'm not gonna paint it as like a perfect picture. It's hard. Yeah. Like, you are ultimately no longer the person that's like, this is what I want and I'm going to do it. You have to kind of understand. But now I've come back, it's made me a bit more open-minded when people suggest things to me, because I've been on that other side and been like, actually, I think I'm now a better CEO because of it. I'm like, I've been on the other side and I've been a COO, and I can understand why you're saying that, because you probably have more interaction with my team than I do on the day-to-day basis. So I think it's worked in both ways.
I think it's funny what you just said there, because I remember when I had a job, then you get frustrated at things. Oh, why are they doing that for? Why are they doing this for? And you, especially from the employee's perspective, you think that all the decisions above you can be wrong sometimes. Then when you go into the entrepreneur role yourself or the leader role yourself, there's, oh, that's why they do this, or that's why they do that. And you suddenly, I felt a bit bad. It's like, oh, I used to complain about this, this, and this, because actually they were really just doing the best they could. And I think sometimes there needs to be better understanding between like staff and the leaders, because what's happened, I think, historically is that the leaders or the CEOs, whoever, always want to show themselves as strong and knowing what they're doing. But we're all just people, right? It doesn't matter how big a business you're running. You're going to have doubts. You're going to things where, oh, you're not quite sure about. And by being open about that, or saying, I've got this going on in my personal life, so I'm a bit stressed out, you can really humanize yourself. And I think that really helps. And I guess you've had that flip twice now. So you had from being an employee to then becoming your own boss and hiring people, then to going back to being an employee, but still having, it's an interesting role, as you said, as COO, because you're simultaneously, it's not your company, but you're making big hiring decisions.
Yeah.
So you're in that weird limbo zone, right? Which
absolutely.
Is obviously very difficult to manage, and it takes a lot of skill to do that. And as like you're growing your own company now and you're back full time again, what's the things that you're excited about for the future with it?
I'm at a very beautiful time where I'm going to do things differently this time. Like, I'm going to make a lot of changes. I think I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I think that was a beautiful point you made, where there needs to be a better relationship between kind of the leadership team and everyone in the company. A big philosophy I would live by is fail, right? And it stands for first attempt in learning. Fail. Like I failed so many times. And you need to show those vulnerable moments, and I don't really want to call them weaknesses, but like difficult times to your team. Because
it's imperfections, right? You don't need to be perfect. You've got imperfections, we all do.
Yeah.
But then when people know that, they can really humanize you.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just this big evil boss who's whatever, it's harder. Absolutely.
And I've realized since I've kind of taken that philosophy on, that my team have like gone to the next level, because they're telling me things and they're thinking outside the box more than they did previously, because they're like, well, if I get it wrong, it doesn't really matter. My job's not really on the line. It's kind of like an idea that I'm going to throw out there. And those are the moments where I'll sit in a meeting with my team and they'll be like, what about this, Leah? And I'm like, holy crap, where? And they're like, actually, I was in the bath. And I was like, what? Like, and that's when I'm like, do you know what? Sometimes they do really like don't work, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
But then it's worth all those like really crazy ideas when one's right. Like when one's right, that's the one. Because I think when I thought of pop-up party and play, it was that one idea. Like I had so many ideas that I wanted to think about childcare, but it was that one crazy idea of pop-up party and play and mobile childcare on site at different locations that suddenly became a thing. And like I always think, like I heard this, I was listening to a podcast the other day. I think it was actually like Will Smith said it. Like he was like, one day someone crazily thought of putting people in a metal cylinder and just like wrapping it over and then just flying people over water. Like just one, what? Like that is a crazy concept. But some person thought about it one day, like, let's put people in a metal cylinder and let's fly them over water. And that's it. Like, I want my team to think like that. I don't want them to think, oh my God, if I mention this, I'm failing. And therefore, I'm not even going to think of the idea.
So speaking of crazy ideas, I think most people listening will think the idea to swim the channel is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So where did that come from and how did all of that preparation go?
My journey has actually been quite a long one. I swam the English Channel to raise money for charity, but my journey of giving back actually started when I was very young. I'm from Indian heritage. I went back, my dad was born here. My mum was born in Ludhiana, but came over when she was about 6 months. So my first trip back to India was when I was 7. I went back and I remember the exact point when reality hit me was when I was in a car in Delhi traffic. It was really hot and we were sitting inside the car with my mum and dad and my brother. We were in air conditioned on the way to a 5-star hotel to have a beautiful lunch with our family. And this little girl came up to the window, and the people that have probably been to India know exactly what I'm talking about. She was disheveled, she was unkempt. She had her baby sister on her hip, and she was knocking on the window, like gesturing for food. And that moment in my life profoundly changed me, even at 7 years old. I just did not understand why my life was so different. I was brown, she was brown. Just because I was born into a different family, why did I deserve my lifestyle and she deserved that lifestyle? And that was a moment I realized I was put on this earth to do something about this. Like, I don't know what it was. So then I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm only 7 years old. So I was like, I want to do something that's big for me. And at the time, at 7 years old, I decided to give up chocolate, sweets and fizzy drinks because that was my love. That was my passion. So I gave it up for an entire year. I went home and I spoke about it, and my teachers were like, okay, this is amazing. We're going to donate. And I didn't want to raise money. I just kind of wanted to do a personal sacrifice. I remember raising like £1,000. It was huge for a 7-year-old. And a few years later, I went back and visited a school for blind children and bought Braille books for them. And that's kind of where my journey started. And I kind of wanted to carry on giving back and serve. It was always focused on children. As you probably understand, my business, my whole life, my whole philosophy is around children.
A theme, yeah.
Here's my theme.
Yeah.
So it's always been focusing on children. I think the reason why I focus on children more than any other kind of demographic is I feel like children don't always have a choice. They are put in situations and they don't choose to be in. And I want to help give voice to individuals that can't always speak up. So it was always focused on that. So I ran the London Marathon and I did quite a few number of kind of charity events leading up to the channel. The reason why I decided to swim the channel is I actually went back to Mumbai to find my next project. I was like, right, I'm ready for my next project.
Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying all of the wonderful insights that Leah's given us so far. Just a quick note that we're about to dive into some very serious topics regarding sexual assault. And if that's a triggering topic for you, please skip ahead to the latter parts of the podcast. Let's get back to the show.
And it was actually the British Asian Trust who I spoke to, and they have a kind of project they support in the red light district of Mumbai. And they took me into one of the projects. So this project was where families had sadly sold their daughters to the better life. They thought the better life, but actually was forced into sex trafficking. So these girls had been like sold into the industry. I actually went into one of the brothels. So I went in and it was awful. It was unkept. There was wires everywhere. It was rat infested. It was absolutely awful conditions. I went into one of the rooms and there was 3 planks in there that was slightly raised. 3 women were sitting on these planks of wood, all these pots and pans, and their whole livelihood was under these benches. And they were just malnourished, bruises on their arms. There was actually a tally on the wall that was like carved, and I asked the social worker, like, what is this tally? And they said, well, actually the pimp will give them a number of clients they've got to serve. And the moment they've served those number of clients, they will then get released. The tally changes every day. So they never hit that. So psychologically, they've been bruised, like mentally. And as a psychologist, this just like tore on my heartstrings. One of the women, they're tied to their beds when they're sold into the industry, and they will not get to see light of day for years. One of them was like, I was tied to the bed for 3 years and I didn't leave there. So, and they were bruised, and I was just so overwhelmed by emotion that they were forced into this, and they were raped on a daily basis, and I was just, my whole, I remember the life just coming out of me and being like, I can't believe this happened. And then all of a sudden, all these children started running in, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. And I was like, what? Like, who are these kids? Like, why are they in this, like, brothel? Like, and the social worker came around to me and goes, these are the children of the women. They've been raped, or they've got clients and they've fallen pregnant. They were like half Chinese, half black, half white, and they've fallen pregnant and they've given birth. And I said, but where do they sleep? Like, they sleep underneath a plank of wood with these pots and pans. And on a daily basis, they watch their own mothers being raped and have performed sexual activities. And that was the moment, as a child psychologist, I realized that I will not live in a world where children have to witness this. Like, it's not happening. I was in tears and I just didn't know what I needed to do, but I knew I needed to do something that would make sure that this will not happen. So I flew back to the UK and I researched, and I was like, I want to do something so ridiculous. People ask me this question you asked: why the hell did you decide to swim the English Channel? Not only that, as the first British Asian woman, why? Like, no one else has done it. Why do you want to do it? Because I can tell the story. This is the reason. So I can tell the story. I managed to raise £100,000 for this charity. So the 100K went to build a shelter for the children next door. So they now go from the school to the shelter, so they don't have to go into that industry. So it's kind of like broken that cycle. And the parents, the mothers, will go into the shelter and visit them rather than the children having to go into that, be exposed to that lifestyle. But that was the main reason why I decided to do it.
And how was, so it's difficult for me to even know what to say back in some ways, because that's obviously such a difficult experience and it's so amazing what you've done there. How was that process of then actually swimming the channel and getting yourself ready? Because I guess in my head, it's like, because the actual mission, that will just drive you so strongly, right? Where it doesn't really matter how hard it is, because you know it's coming out on the other side. It's worth it. And I guess, do you have any other big plans in the future? Have you got any new challenges you want to take on and potentially help even more?
Yeah, I think on the first question, in terms of like your mission and everything, I think I'm human. Like sometimes that story is a great story and it's like amazing and inspiring, but I'm a human being. And I remember when I was it was an 18-month training process and it was intense. I was training like 8 to 10 hours a week. There were days where like my body hurt so much I couldn't even sleep. I was up in the night crying all night. My body hurt. I got a really bad stomach infection. I was like being sick. I couldn't process food. My hair was falling out. I was gaining weight. Aunties were being like, you're looking fat. So my confidence was being knocked. Like, I'm a human being. Like, this story is difficult, but like, I'm also human. And it was a really, really tough time. But you're right. Like, I had to focus that, like, again, it comes back to that thing of like, I made a choice to do this. Those children they were never given that choice or that voice. Yep. So I had to keep thinking about that. So that was kind of like my motivation. But I failed a lot of times. I had qualifying swims where I was pulled out and was told like, you can't do this. But it was all a mindset thing. I think something that was really key in learning for me over that period of like swimming the English Channel was 67% of that swim was a mental game. Like mentally, you have to be in a good place. And I think that's what comes onto my next mission, is that why I've decided to write my book, Making a Splash, was it's so much of a success, or whatever you want to define as success, is a mental game. It's you need to mentally be in the right place when obstacles come in or things happen where that doesn't quite go your way. Those are the pivotal moments of when you will be successful or you will not. That is the moment. And that's what the importance of my book is that I can attitude in the moment where like you just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
So it's so incredible what you've done. And I think we're going to have to get you back on again to quote your book again in the future because we're running out of time. So we've got to move on to quick fire questions now. The first one, which is always the hardest, is who are 3 British Asians that you'd love to shout out that you think people listening right now should be paying attention to or following?
I love Dr. Raghuram Chatterjee. I think he got me through the pandemic. He got me through those times where I was doing like 2-hour walks. He has a long form podcast, but he also has his bite size on a Friday. I think he is just absolutely inspirational. He gives you quick tips, and it's like his philosophy is that kind of you can help your well-being through kind of holistic approach. It doesn't always have to be medicine. So he is someone like listen to regularly. I also think my mum, she is phenomenal. She is an author and a coach. She's the one that's kind of driven me, inspired me, one that kind of makes me realize that anything is possible. Yeah, her company Savran has like an Instagram that does a lot of inspirational quotes, but she also is a coach as well and is a big person. But I know that you've had him on, but my brother, I know it sounds crazy because I said 2 people in my family, but if you listen back to his kind of talk with you, is that he's gone against the grain. He was dyslexic. He was literally told that he couldn't even pass exams, and he is now like the biggest pre-seed investor in the UK, which is phenomenal. But he does it with, I think with him is that he runs his company, but he's also very humble, and a value of his is that kind of like giving back. And I think that having that kind of between the two of like being able to be successful and make money, but also the importance of giving back, and that as a CEO, I think that's so unusual to see. So I think they're probably the 3 people. So
with Reese as well, I can confirm, because obviously I see people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So behind the scenes, like after our podcast, and he's like offered to help us, he's put us in touch with people. So not everybody does, obviously, right? And like he's been really helpful and really kind in that way too. And I think he shouted out your mum as well. So she's got a double shout out now, so she's doing well.
Oh no, she's doing really well, yeah.
And then the next one is, if people are listening right now and they're looking for guidance, what could you potentially help them with?
I think for me, my main thing is that what I've realized over life is that it's okay to not know what you want from life. Like I think people come on here on your podcast and they've done things, they've achieved things. And I think sometimes as a listener, you may feel quite overwhelmed and being like, oh, I don't know my purpose and I don't know what's going to happen. Like I was blessed that at like 7 years old, I found I want to work with children and I want to give back and this is my importance. I think for me, like, I think sometimes having that conversation, like reach out to me, like I'm on Instagram, like at Leah Chowdhry, like talk, like let's have that conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's like find your passion, your purpose. I think a lot of my friends, my clients, my like students will come to me and be like, I don't know what I want. And I think because I've been so blessed to find that so early, there's always like asking the right questions. And I feel like I can support people to find their purpose so that the moment they found their passion, they will be successful. If it's business, giving back, whatever they want to do.
And then on the flip side, what's something that you need help with right now? What could somebody help you with?
Well, as we kind of touched on a little bit, is that I've got my book, Making a Splash, that's just come out. The book is a children's book, so aged between like 3-year-olds and 9-year-olds. It's a picture book, and the book is all about kind of the importance of giving back as well as having an I can attitude. It's got activities in the back to kind of like help children do that. But all of the net proceeds are actually going to Cancer Research UK for young children and people. So yeah, go out and buy the book. I actually do talks about it. I go into schools. So if you would like me to come to your children's school, reach out. I do assemblies. But yeah, go and buy the book and spread the word, because I want children to understand the importance of giving back and the importance of their mindset, and they can achieve anything they want in life.
I love that. So really enjoyed this podcast and having you on today.
Thank you.
Have you got any final words for the audience?
Don't be scared. Just do it. Like, take that step, take that leap of faith. Like, even if it's like a 10%, start that podcast, write that book. Just take one small action and the rest will follow.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It means a huge amount to us. And we don't think you realise how important you are. Because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you leave us a 5-star review, it makes a world of difference. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here, to inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians, if you do those things, you can help us achieve that mission. And you can help us make a bigger impact. And by doing that, it means we can get bigger guests, we can host more events, we can do more for the community. So you can play a huge part. So thank you so much for supporting us.